All right, let's get started at 7:05. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Welcome everybody to our Montbrook 2019 Teacher Professional Development Workshop webinar. We're sponsoring this webinar tonight in order to prepare you for the trip that you guys are going to join us on to collect fossils at the Montbrook Fossil Site. I'm Dr. Bruce McFadden. I'm the director of the Thompson Institute of Earth Systems, and I'm joined tonight by Michael Ziegler, who's a fellow of the Scientist in Every Florida School fellow. He's also soon to be a graduated master's student in geology, and he's doing his research on the geology of the Montbrook site. In the upper left-hand corner, we're joined by Brian Abramowitz, who's the K-12 coordinator on the Scientist in Every Florida School project for the Northern District. In the lower right-hand corner with plaster all over her hands is another one of my graduate students, Jeanette Pirlou, who's a PhD student in the biology department, also a fellow of the Institute and the Scientist in Every Florida School, and she's studying the biology or the paleobiology of the animals that we're collecting from Montbrook, in particular some of the mammals, including the elephants-like animals that she'll be talking about in a few minutes. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Stephanie Killingsworth, who is another one of our K-12 SEFS district coordinator for South Florida, and she's connecting remotely from Palm Beach County. So can we move to the next slide, please, for whoever is controlling? Good. So the outline of our talk is both content of science and logistics. I don't know how many of you have ever been on a fossil dig before, but every fossil dig is a little different from one another, and we want to make sure that you have the proper orientation for what to expect and what to learn at Montbrook. So that's the purpose of our webinar, and we'll be presenting for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll have about 10 minutes or so for your questions, either about the content of the science and the site, or if you have any additional concerns about logistics. Next slide. Okay, so
Right.
Michael, I will now mute my microphone, and I'll move this on to the first part of the science content for this, and that's the discussion of the geology led by Michael Ziegler. So take it away, Michael.
Great. Thanks, Bruce. It's really it's awesome to see all of you guys participating in this webinar, and it's really cool to see some familiar faces too, some even from our human evolution workshop. So I'm glad you guys all made it. I'm excited to come excavate with you guys this weekend. So just a little bit of background. What you're seeing on the left is going to be some drone imagery of the Montbrook fossil site. Now, this was from about a season and a half ago. And so since then, it's expanded a little bit and it's changed. But the majority of all this site has been dug by volunteers, staff at the Florida Museum of Natural History, and then also some students ranging from high school all the way through college. So you have to be 15 or older usually to excavate here at the site. But one cool thing is that this about like essentially an underground pool-sized pit has been excavated predominantly by our fancy tools being screwdrivers that we pick away at the sediment with. So luckily our sediment is pretty unconsolidated and loose, so we can just get that sands and clays out of there and get our fossils. So it's been excavated since 2015, and actually last week was the anniversary of the first day where it was excavated back then. So we're looking at about late Miocene times for these fossils and these sediments. And to give some background here, Miocene's about 23 million to about 5 million years ago. So we're going to be more on that tail end. So maybe anywhere from 7 to a little bit younger than 5 million years. And to date, it's produced over 40, but now even upwards of 50,000 fossils have been pulled from the site. So if we want to move to the next slide. And it's one cool thing also is that in Florida and a lot of other states where you find a good amount of fossils, they're found through serendipitous events. So in California, they actually have remediations where if fossils are found through construction or highway building that they will have to report it. But that's not necessarily the case in Florida and states surrounding us. So this was found by the granddaughter of the site owner, Eddie Hodge, and she was out there looking for, actually, I think, arrowheads, and she found this fossil, and eventually it made its way to the anthropology department to see if it was human or had some sort of connection to human influence, and then down into the vertebrate paleontology department, where it was identified as a fossil. So since then, it's become one of the most prolific sites in Florida, producing a ton of material. And Jeanette will go over some of those more charismatic creatures later on in the webinar. And what I'm going to focus on is mainly the sediments that have been pulled from the site, just to give some sort of context of what like the paleo environment would have looked like, or what the surrounding environment would have looked like at the time when those fossils were buried. So to give a little bit of context around the area, we are going to be excavating at the Montbrook site, and it is denoted by the star there, a little bit in the middle of the map. It's in South Levy County there, Eastern Levy County. And it's surrounded by not that many different types of sediments, mainly because all these sands and clays have kind of been grouped together in one deposit that's called the Hawthorne Formation. Now, we don't have to memorize that or anything like that, but the only reason I bring it up is because Hawthorne deposits can be found almost throughout the entirety of northern and central Florida, and a good amount of parts in southern Florida as well. But these sediments, mainly sands and clays, that's what we'll be seeing at Montbrook. They're not really well distinguished. They're kind of a catch-all or a trash bin group. And I put it up in the right-hand corner. Those acronyms, the FUBAR actually stands for fouled up beyond all recognition. And that was published in from few papers back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, just meaning that these sediments kind of are hard to distinguish between. So that was one of the goals, was to find out what these environments mean. So if we move to the next slide, or I guess I didn't get to talk about the other localities or other fossil sites around Montbrook. Montbrook's pretty unique in the fact that it was age and the animals that we're pulling out from there, and also the fact that it does not represent a sinkhole site in Florida. So it's not one of those caved in deposits that we see around a lot of Florida. So what we're looking at is, from that drone imagery, you should recognize on the right-hand side that sand pit that's been excavated by all of our volunteers. And that gridded setup is basically 1 meter plots by 1 meter plots. So those are the squares that you all are going to be excavating in. So we're going to be in close proximity, because we're going to have a bunch of people down at the lower part of the site, and then most likely, I think we're going to be stationed up in the newer area that has just been excavated. This last field season has been producing some pretty cool things. So what we're going to be looking at here is kind of near where that purple square is. That's where my research area was, and we'll be just west and north of that. So overall, how I was saying, those Hawthorne group sediments, those sands and clays, that's what we're going to be excavating in and trying to find these fossils. And just below that is the Ocala limestone and the Avon Park limestone. So it's pretty shallow. Once we did some cores at the site, we could tell that even in some of the sections below this fossil locality, about 10 to 12 feet, we were hitting bedrock or that limestone there. So it's in some cases, it's a pretty shallow deposit. So the longevity or the amount of time that we can excavate this site is a little bit unknown, but we've still been pulling out some pretty awesome finds. Just last week, there was a giant river otter skull pulled from the site too. So there's still a ton of stuff to find. And then overall, I won't go into my whole research, but based on the sands and clays that I analyzed from the site, and then also a lot of the unique features that I'll point out once we're on site there. That in concert with a lot of the trace fossils found at the site too, have produced produced results that are indicative of a fluvial or estuarine environment. So it's transitioning from this mainly river-fed environment to an environment that's a little bit lower in energy and has time for these clays to settle a little bit. So on the map there on the right, other than it's further away from the ocean influenced waters and further upstream in that freshwater environment, which kind of works in concert with the fossils that we're finding at the site too, because they mainly constitute a freshwater, terrestrial, and saltwater environment, and a good mix of environments in between as well. So overall, these sediments are from the Hawthorne group, those sands and clays, but they represent a unique environment, this marginal environment being a transition from fluvial or this river-fed environment to an estuarine environment that is actually seeing some influence from tides. So it's something that's very unique and is not really represented in the Hawthorne deposits that we talked about earlier. So from just a geologic standpoint, Montbrook fossil locality is pretty exceptional and a unique glimpse into Florida's past.
All right, so we'll transition now into the biology aspect of the site. We'll go over some cool specimen pictures of items that you might come across. For the most part, people that go out there will have an extremely high chance of finding an example of what's on the screen now, which is of a turtle. This is called Trachemes inflata, and it's related to the red-eared sliders that we see these days in our freshwater systems. So we identified the posterior, or the end over here where the tail would have stuck out, and then the head would come out on the other end. And prior to the site, we only had examples of this specimen from individual pieces of the shell. And then once the site was discovered, we have over hundreds of complete shells, and it's a really important site for the freshwater ecosystem. We have not just this type of turtle, but we also have several snappers, alligator snappers, tortoises, and other smaller turtles like mud turtles, box turtles. So this is a very important site for the freshwater species. My favorite species to date at this site is my species of interest for my dissertation. These are called rhynchotheriums. They are four-tusked elephants, so they have your general two tusks from their upper jaw, as well as two lower tusks from their lower jaw, which you can see sticking out here towards the front of the jaw, and then these are the teeth. So you're looking at right now a lower jaw of one of these elephants. And this site is important for that because we have more than 30 individual specimens, where normally when you go to a dig site, you might find one or two elephants, especially the large ones. You might find a skull in pretty beat up shape. But here we're really lucky where we've had a great deal of individuals come out of it, from teeny tiny little baby elephants to adult elephants like the specimen on the picture. So this is great to look at the population that was occurring at the site during the time of the late Miocene. So stay tuned for that with my research. Moving forward, we see a great combination of the last two specimens, and we see here one of those fantastic turtle shells embedded in a lower jaw of another elephant. And so I have a great story that goes with this, which I'll share with you on Saturday. I won't take up too much time. But this is a wonderful specimen so that we can actually see the two important specimens together. Without them, obviously the elephant did not eat the turtle, but it's cool to see how items are preserving and how great shape these specimens truly are. Another important thing that we want to discuss is the birds that are coming out of the site. Bird bones are really difficult to preserve because, as you know, they are hollow, so they are difficult to preserve. But the site has come up with several different species of birds, including the first paper of the site that's come out earlier this spring of a new heron. And the bones are here on the left-hand side, and the picture on the right shows the owner of the site, the landowner in the hat, and then our bird specialist or ornithologist, Dave Stedman, in the sunglasses to the left. And they're discussing the heron that was found there. We also have examples of the oldest swan in North America, and some swifts like hummingbirds at the site, plus some other shorebirds. So the site is really important for that. As well as some of the fun carnivores that you want to find, including this Borophagus hilly, or it's similar to like a hyena dog. So it did the same thing functionally as hyenas, where it was crushing bones of its prey using these really sharp teeth. And Borophagus hilli, as well as Ringotherium, and the next couple species that we'll talk about actually help us date the site using what we call biochronology, using the biology that's present to help us date and age the site itself, since we know that certain species lived within a very specific time frame, and if we find those same species together, we can narrow down the time frame that those fossils were laid down. So Hexameryx simpsoni is a staghorn that is found at the site, and they have these very characteristic horns on their head. So that helps us identify it as a specific species. We also have Teleoceras species, which are a type of rhino that was found here in North America. And the crown jewel really is the saber-toothed cat skull that was found a couple years ago by one of our volunteers. And you can see here, it's upside down right now, but this protrusion up here, I don't know if you can see my mouse cursor, Brian. So this protrusion here is one of the canines, one of those saber tooths. This is one of the cheek teeth. And then over here are the cheekbones, really, the zygomatic arches, back of the skull, front of the skull. This is the bottom part's technically the top of the skull, so it is upside down. It was pretty crushed, but the skull itself, but we are able to see the saber and some of the teeth and able to identify the species from that. So talking about the mixed faunal assemblages example, like Mike was saying, we have several examples of the marine environment, including several shark species. Brackish, so mixed freshwater and marine. We have several shark species as well as fish and mammals like the giant otter. And we have many from the freshwater example, including fish, turtles, a lot of gators. So we have a big mixture from marine all the way to freshwater, and those can all be found within 1 square. Finding one type of environment in each square, you might sometimes find a mixture of everything. And so one of the big things that our participants find, our volunteers find often, will be fish scales, like gar scales, or turtle pieces. The Trachomys pieces are really common within the site.
Okay, so before we jump into questions, I want to quickly go over some of the logistics of the day. And much of what I speak about here is in your e-pamphlet, but since it's been about 3 weeks since that was sent out, I just want to give everybody a quick refresh on what you can expect during the day on Saturday. So when you arrive, you should go ahead and park in this parking lot, that green one on the bottom right that says UFNE decal. You can park there all day on Saturday for free. You don't have to worry about paying at all. Parking is going to be free that day. Please make sure you arrive no later than 8 a.m. At 8 a.m., we will split into groups, and Michael and Bruce will start to give tours of the Montbrook exhibit at the museum. Next slide. Okay, so the schedule for the day looks like this. Again, please make sure you arrive no later than 8 a.m. At 8:15, we will begin our tour for that day. Again, Michael and Bruce will be giving the tour of the Montbrook exhibit at the Florida Museum of Natural History. From there, we will transport you all. The SEFS staff will drive our museum vans to the Montbrook site. And then we basically have all day to dig and excavate. We'll have a 1-hour break for lunch, which we will be providing. We will wrap up our dig at 2:30, which will give us about a half hour to discuss the significance of any things that you may have found that day before heading back to the museum or heading back home if you chose to drive yourself there. So one of the biggest questions we receive is, what should I bring? And I would say the most important thing that you can bring that day is a water bottle. Try to bring as much water as you can. We recommend at least 1 to 2 liters. Typically, it is hot out there and you dehydrate quickly. This week looks a little bit different. This week, we are a little unsure what to expect. There may be a chance of rain. Whether or not there is a chance of rain, we will still go to that dig site. Since that is the case, please make sure you bring a jacket. Please make sure you bring clothes to dress accordingly for the weather, whatever it may be that day. In addition, please make sure you bring hand sanitizer, sunscreen, a hat, bug spray, and if you'd like, during your lunch break, to bring a camping chair as well. And lastly, what should you wear that day? As you are out in the elements, as you are digging, please make sure you bring closed-toe shoes. Please make sure you are wearing pants that are appropriate for the conditions that you are about to be digging in. You may bring short sleeve and a long sleeve shirt. The weather may change. You may decide you want to change what you are wearing to be more comfortable throughout the day. And lastly, similarly, please make sure you dress in layers. As I said, the weather may change. We may see some rain. Whatever it is, please make sure you check the weather ahead of time and make sure you bring any apparel that is going to keep you comfortable throughout the day.
All right, at this time, we'd like to open things up to questions. If anybody has questions regarding the site itself, any of the science, or perhaps questions on the logistics that we have not covered or you are unclear on, please let us know now.
Stephanie, somebody asked me recently a question. What happens to all the fossils that are collected on Saturday?
That's a great question. So they actually end up going back to the museum and they get cataloged. And if there's something very significant, they will be prepped by preparators. And I think you'll get to see a little bit about that process at the museum itself. There's a Montbrook exhibit that you will be visiting.
And just to add to that stuff, I was going to say that all of the finds that you guys individually will find, everyone will get an individual bag with a label, which is why everyone had to sign disclaimer forms so that we have your information on file. All of your bags will be labeled with your name, so anything that you find will be cataloged under your name, so that in a couple months to several more than just a couple months, sometimes 6 months, you can go back through our online database and search your name, and you can find all of the things that you personally found that are cataloged under your name. And to answer Monica's question, which I see Victor already did, yes, you are more than welcome to take as many pictures as you like, and you're welcome to share, for the most part, most of them online. The only thing that we ask, because it is on private property, that you remove any geotagging, georeferencing, GPS locations on your phone. To do that, you can do that in your settings, where you turn off the GPS location. And if you need help with that, we can help you with that on Saturday. But we do ask that we keep the site private to ensure privacy for the landowner, safety for people that shouldn't be there, because there is heavy machinery going in and out, as well as safety for the fossils and our volunteers out there against people that shouldn't be there. But you're welcome to take pictures of things. If we find anything that is super, super important and rare, our collections manager will let us know not to share pictures of it yet until it's okay. But for the most part, you can take as many pictures as you like.
There's a question about bringing a bag for personal belongings to the site. Sure.
Yeah,
small
absolutely.
little bag is fine.
Yeah, backpack's fine to carry your water, hat, your belongings, whatever's easiest. We have a canopy up out there, and everyone just puts their stuff under the canopy. Everyone there is a big community, and we're very careful to take care of each other's things.
Yeah, and if you want to bring a bag out there for your personal effects too, we can also lock them up in our van or even your personal vehicle if you choose to drive out there.
Monica's got a question about gloves. Generally, people don't wear gloves, but that does bring to mind the concept of a little cushion to sit on or to kneel on. If you've got one of those little seat cushions for a game, those are sometimes nice.
So we do have some knee pads there, like the big gardening knee pads that can be used. Those go pretty quickly. So like Steph said, if you want to bring them, you can. We don't have gloves out there, but if you have your own personal garden gloves, you're welcome to bring them as well. I have a hard time digging with gloves, but sometimes it's nice to have them when we're moving heavy jackets or when you're moving buckets of sand. As you can see in the picture, we have a bunch of kitty litter buckets in the background. We don't have a lot of cats that are alive, but we use the empty buckets to move the sand from our squares out to the spoil pile. So there is some manual labor involved. So just for you to be aware, and it might be helpful if you have gloves. Any other questions?
So while people are thinking about some questions, another thing to note too is that this site, although it's a site that's being excavated by the Florida Museum, it's of a lot of interest educationally as well. So one of the goals is to provide these authentic research experiences, but also to provide the most up-to-date knowledge on the site to the classroom. So from this, we've had a few of our participants actually coming to the site were part of a collaboration this past summer where they were looking through sediment to find micro or tiny fossils that was part of ongoing research too. So there's a lot of potential collaboration and extensions into your lessons.
So there's a question about what if you accidentally damage a fossil in the process of undigging? What are the repercussions? It happens. The fortunate thing is the team is very good about being able to glue things back together. Try to do your best. And if you're very, nervous about something that you find, call in one of the paleontologist experts and they will help you navigate around that particular specimen. But yeah, it does happen.
And when we're out there, we'll show you where you can and can't step. We have our own system of that lets us know where things are currently being covered up for safety, and we'll go over that. I mean, a lot of times we just ask that people go carefully when they're digging. We don't want you. We'll equip you with our handy dandy screwdrivers, and we ask that you don't just jam it into the sand. You're not hacking at the sand. You're carefully removing sections of sand, and we'll show you how to dig, and when you do uncover something, how to dig around it carefully to prevent as much damage. We do have glue to consolidate the pieces. If we find something large, like we have down here, we can jacket it so that we can bring back in the lab. And we'll go over that when we're actually at the site. It's a little bit difficult to teach you how to dig over a webinar. It's much easier once you're actually at the site. So we'll go over that safety portion on Saturday. But that's a great question.
Yeah.
There are no.
Yeah, that's actually a great question.
We won't kick you out of the site. I've definitely broken.
A lot of people, and even myself, when you first think about excavating, you think maybe like Indiana Jones, where it's just like brushing away this sand. A lot of times it takes a lot more work than that, and things get ruined, not ruined, but they just get broken or
they're already broken.
Yeah. So it's not a big deal. If you found one perfectly preserved, that'd be extremely rare. So they break quite often, and we're experts at gluing stuff together. It's like a little bit of a puzzle.
Yeah. And as you guys think about any more questions, you guys are able to bring them with you to the site on Saturday. But I will say that there's a really active closed Facebook group that you'll be invited to once everyone has submitted their forms, where you can track finds on the daily basis. We share, when the site is open, we'll share daily images of what's found, just a quick summary. And then when the site isn't open, we'll share pictures of specimens being prepped out, of research that has recently been conducted, like Dave's work on the heron, Michael's defense on his master's thesis, that sort of thing, just so that everyone that's been a part of the dig can stay up to date with what's been happening. That's where a lot of these pictures came from as well.
Any more questions out there?
If anyone, I think everyone, I'm looking at the participant list, I think everyone that's on this call has already sent me their filled out volunteer form. So awesome, good job. We only have a couple more to go, and that's just so that we can get all the logistical paperwork out of the way. But it looks like I think everyone on this call is already good. So thanks for that.
Yeah, so we're at a half an hour now, and we promised that our webinar would be about a half an hour long, and I'm not seeing that we have any more questions. If any of the other teachers that you know were unable to participate in real time in this webinar, or for some of you who signed on a little late, this entire webinar for half an hour is being recorded, and Brian, I presume that we'll be able to send out the link to the recording tomorrow or soon if anybody wants to see it again, or send it off to any of your other colleagues that are coming out in the field on Saturday. And unless let's see, Brian, did you have any final wrap-up things to say? And then we can adjourn for the evening, and we'll see everybody on Saturday.
Nothing from me. I'm just looking forward to seeing everybody soon.
Okay, everybody, we don't see any additional questions, so thanks a lot for tuning in tonight, and we look forward to seeing you on Saturday at 8 o'clock at the museum on the campus of the University of Florida. Thank you very much.
See you guys Saturday.
Bye, everybody.